afternoon, everyone. I'm Catherine Whitfield from WSP. I'm also a board member of ITS UK and vice chair of ITS UK. So lovely to see everybody here. I hope you've all enjoyed the session so far. I think it's been a really good morning so far and a good afternoon, and it's so nice to see so many people here, particularly the contingent of WSP people that have all just arrived at the back there. Third session of the day is around sustainability in society. I think it's really interesting that this morning we've heard lots and lots about technology, we've heard lots about data, we've heard lots about mobility as a service and integration and all of those kind of things. And I've been noting down in my book how many times we've heard the word safety and we've heard the word users. And it's not that many, if I'm being honest. Somebody did raise a very interesting point earlier on, and they made the point of, what are we doing this for? Why are we all here? Why are we all talking about intelligent transport systems, and why are we all doing that? And I'm hoping that this session is going to kind of bring some focus onto that, because we're here for society. We're here for everybody in this room, and we're here to make sure it's safe and sustainable. So we've got an hour's session. We have got a short break in the middle for everyone to go off, have a comfort break. We're going to start off with a presentation from Vivi Michalaki from National Highways, and she's going to share her thoughts on the role of the user and the growing understanding within National Highways of user experience and the role of user behaviour. So after Vivi's presentation, I will be taking questions, so if anyone thinks of anything, then keep that in your head. And so over to you, Vivi, thank you.
Oh, does this work? Sorry, I'll need to quickly grab this and see if I can make technology work. Yes. Okay, excellent. Thank you again for the invitation. It's actually lovely to be here. I've been taking notes from all the previous sessions, and I'm quite relieved to say that there are actually some links with what I've been putting together. So it's good to know that at least there is some neutral thinking. So as Catherine said, I'm Vivi Michalaki from National Highways. I am the head of Intelligent Transport Systems and Mobility in the organization. And we are going to start with a brief introduction. I'm sure most of you are familiar with National Highways, who we are, but for those that may not be, we're the national operator for the English Motorway and Road Network, so what we call the Strategic Road Network. Since we're talking about technology, we've got a vast variety of different systems, technology systems on the network. This is just a snapshot. And we are carrying 1/3 of all traffic and 2/3 of all freight. So that there is a great focus in that space for us too. As the previous presentations and discussion went on, to be honest, I was thinking, I think there were a few people that mentioned the vision and where we are all going. And to be honest, I'm not quite confident that we're all necessarily heading in the same direction. But as National Highways, we have set our 2050 strategy. So this has been in accordance with public strategies from DFT, etc. And as part of that, we have identified a set of trends that we expect will influence the way people travel on our network, and mostly have to do with demand infrastructure and vehicles. Sustainability really cuts across all of them, to be honest. You'll see electrification. There is, of course, the construction innovation which links to sustainability, but as Catherine said, I am going to focus more on the user side rather than the construction civil side of what we do. And it's important to note that even though we have started as a road builder, very civil engineering focused organization, we have moved towards becoming an operator, which is where we are at the moment, gotten back to all those technology systems we have on the network. But where we aspire to be is a service provider for the customers and the operators. In terms of sustainability, as we all know, there are some key plans, key commitments coming from the government, and National Highways has responded to that with our net zero plan for 2050. So that is looking at corporate emissions to start with, so eliminating those by 2030, then moving to maintenance and construction, And eventually, by 2050, again, working with everyone else, eliminating road user emissions on the network. But before we go into how we do that, I would like to talk a bit about the context of sustainability. So I've taken some inspiration and information from statistics that I would like to share. So in terms of where we are in terms of traffic on the network, obviously we had COVID that massively changed how people traveled, hence the dip. So the diagram on the left shows the traffic levels. In terms of motorways in particular, we have gone up to where we were around 2015, so it's sort of back to normal, but not quite there yet. At the same time, we are seeing that in terms of the length of the network, we are pretty much there. There are some flagship schemes, Lower Thames Crossing and the A303, but apart from that, we're not really talking about expanding the network. So we have to work smarter with what we already have. DfT's projections are traffic is going to increase, even with the most optimistic scenarios, and that is car-based traffic. So we have to do something different if we need to, if we want to hit our sustainability targets at the same time. Again, in terms of the traffic levels, it's quite interesting that van traffic has massively increased to levels that we haven't seen before. So it's all the deliveries that, of course, we know had a peak during the pandemic, and that keeps going up. So that's an interesting trend. It's actually seen as the main factor of traffic congestion in main areas, especially vans, not lorries or cars. And at the same time, we do see that, especially for work-based travel, we do rely a lot on the car. I mean, that's something everyone pretty much picked up on. So unless you're in London, everywhere else in the country, people do rely still on a private vehicle to get to work. So is there anything we can do to change that behavior, change that approach? Especially on sustainability and electric vehicles, this information is from the National Travel Attitude Study, so there is some really good work going on by DfT in terms of understanding what people feel about those trends, technology trends. So on the left-hand side is the confidence level about having a long-distance journey using a battery electric vehicle. You can clearly see there is quite a spread, and I think it's fair to say 50% of the people are just not confident in having a long-distance journey, which obviously most probably would be the case on the strategic road network in a battery electric vehicle. And at the same time, on the right-hand side, these are particular concerns about driving electric vehicles, and there is infrastructure related. Taking the first one as an example, charge point availability, still the confidence is quite low. So the dark blue is for those that cannot read, I appreciate it's a bit small, extremely concerned about the infrastructure available. So all of those things will affect how people think, feel, make decisions, adapt their behaviors to new technologies. We can promote technology solutions as much as we want, but unless we get the user, the end user, on board with the changes, I personally don't think much will change, or at least not anytime soon. And final point on the context, the left-hand side, again, I'm pretty sure there was a reference about cutting back on the journeys altogether, if we can. And the first diagram talks about what people changed in terms of their the way they travel in response to fuel and energy price increases. So we see 2/3 actually did cut down on non-essential journeys. So there are ways, even if it's external factors, such as fuel prices, that can drive those changes. 24% didn't change anything, quite interesting, and there is a bit of an extreme at the bottom. The 3% actually sold the vehicle as a result of that. So then you think, what other options do they have in place to make that decision? Because clearly there must have been another way to manage the essential travel. And on the right-hand side is the confidence in terms of using and app, since we've been talking about mobility as a service, to book a bus journey. So again, there is a bit of a spread. This particular one is based on age, but I don't think that's the only factor. How much people are confident in terms of technology and how they use it, I don't think necessarily comes down to age. So we need to be considering all of those different factors and how comfortable people will be even to be able to use the tool that we are providing. So how much are we taking human factors into the design of those services is the question that will eventually drive that behavioral change and promote sustainability. So on the left-hand side here, we've got, is everyone all right? Yeah, okay. The components of an ITS system. So we've got the vehicle, physical, digital infrastructure, and the human, really important. And on the right-hand side, all of these have been touched on, priorities of what we want the future of a transport system to look like. So sustainable, really key up there, and user-focused. Again, we've talked about personalized services and all of that. So how can we bring the human element of an ITS system with the user-focused and sustainable side together? It's about really designing with the user in mind, and that will drive and influence the user behavior. And then that will feed back to what user-centric design should look like. If we look at the factors, especially that could affect user behavior, and again, I'm thinking much of this has been touched already. So there are certain things that could drive that change and make people potentially make those more sustainable options, take those options and make those decisions. So first of all, there is a personal side, just lifestyle, occupation, age, all sorts of things would be as part of that would affect how our brain works and how we decide to do things. Psychological, so that is about motivation, beliefs, knowledge, feelings, thoughts, all sorts of things that would, again, drive that attitude and that decision making. Since we're talking about transport, resources, of course, so what is available, accessible, and affordable by the people? Again, that will massively change that decision making. And last but not least is the social cultural side. And I think that's an interesting one, especially with the private vehicle and how it has been traditionally, it has been a status symbol, hasn't it, really? So there is more work to do as a society, even, to break that. Is there a same attitude with train as there is with bus and coaches, for example? I don't think there is. So again, more work to be done to bring people more into the public transport. And in terms of the how, I suppose, Catherine, you did mention about safety, not talking about it enough. So it's number one priority in everything that we do. Of course, we want to achieve our sustainability targets, but anything and any measure we implement needs to hit the safety target first. So let's say we want to promote active travel on a road and we promote scooters. Is that really a good idea? I don't know. Is it safe enough to do so? So whatever option we go with, we need to be thinking of safety first. And then, of course, there is the technology and data side. In terms of technology, we did talk about automation, but there are other things that we can do in the meantime, I suppose. One of the initiatives we have as National Highways is, for example, rationalizing the ITS systems we have at the roadside. Got lots of sensors, variable message signs, ways that we take information and provide information back to the driver, and we are looking at ways to make this, make the most of it and make it more rationalized rather than the more fragmented way that we may have seen in some areas so far. In terms of data and information, again, really, really important within the ITS context to understand what data and information would the customer need and start from that. Again, it was mentioned that we get lots and lots of data. We don't necessarily use all of it in the best way, but it's about understanding what the customer will need and use and find useful to make their decisions and drive that change. And we don't necessarily get the full picture of that yet, and it comes down a lot to sharing. And I'm not going to cover all the topics we talked about before about data and security and everything else. But all those issues are there. They are affecting how ITS can support sustainability. Next, we have the customer satisfaction. I'm not going to go too much into that, but it comes down to, again, using the ITS systems in such a way that we have the user at the heart of how we design the system. So, for example, providing efficiency, reliability, all of those things. I know it's an issue with trains or public transport, but equally, it is an issue for the road travel as well. So how can we provide that journey reliability through ITS so then people can make the right choices is a question. And of course, promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion as well. And the last one that I'm going to give an example about and close with that is around integration. And yes, we are very much car-based. We've got those journeys on our network, but we are doing work to promote those end-to-end connections. And mobility as a service is a good example on an urban level. It won't necessarily take into consideration what happens with the strategic road network. So you're in Manchester, Birmingham, all of those areas that have tried MaaS, they won't necessarily take into account, and again, it was mentioned in the session before, that national picture. And as we are the backbone of the transport system, especially the road-based transport system, we are looking at how we can support those applications. So I'm just going to give one example of the integration end-to-end journeys piece of work that we've been developing. This is an example of what a journey would look like from the inception of the idea to go somewhere all the way to post-journey. So we start off with having that desire or making the decision that we need to go somewhere. There is a far planning process, which is essentially the part where we can influence how people make those changes in their choices and behaviors. Then we go into the trip itself once the person has made the decision, potentially going into, from local roads to the SRN, the strategic road network, having a disruption, having to stop, divert, go back to local roads, and having that post-journey reflection, I will say, and feedback in the end. So our question is, how can we, at each point of those 5 stages, intervene and improve things for the customer? What do we need to do as a national operator? And most importantly, how can we work better with everyone else that is a factor in this journey map? We'll take Freddie as an example. So we've used the personas approach. That was part of the methodology. Just taken one example of a person that is a freight driver, not familiar with the strategic road network, and what a journey could look like. So that gives us that richness in terms of understanding where the touch points are in terms of human, physical, digital, and how we can influence things better. So, for example, starting off with a navigation app, that's not necessarily something that we would own, but we would be able to provide the information to third parties to then provide the information to the customer. For example, getting the information from a variable message sign. Again, that's something that as an organization we work on, so we want to be able to provide the information directly to the vehicle rather than just relying on the VMSs, and that will free up the whole network, essentially give us that capability across the whole network. Potentially not being involved, as in having an incident on the road that will affect congestion, and then through all of that we get to potentially more roadworks on the road network, and eventually the delivery being delayed in the end. So at the bottom we have all the things that we could influence. So that would be, as I said, the third party, route planning apps, or the SatNav, the variable message signs over the network, even the motorway services and then information that need to be provided there. And having done this exercise, this is a matrix of potential solutions. So the vertical axis is about the capability that we currently have as an organization, and the horizontal one is about how important that solution might be to provide that end-to-end journey. So naturally, we would focus on the top right, the low-hanging fruit. What we essentially identified there, though, was things that we already somehow do. So using Twitter and social media and those types of solutions. So then we moved to the bottom right quadrant, and especially interchange points. That's the one I would like to mention. So it goes back to that connection of our network with network outside our bubble, as I would like calling it. And we have been doing some really good work with TFGM actually on this. I won't share too much information because it's still in development, but maybe next time I will be able to give you a bit more on that. But essentially, we are looking at those pain points and how we can influence how people travel. Going back to that sustainability point from a user perspective, how can we change those habits? How can we change people's behaviors and decisions? And yeah, on that note, I will say from where we come, it's really important to keep thinking about future aspects and where we want to be, get that collective vision, ideally through all the ITS advancements we've been talking about today, and how can these be applied on a more personalized, user-centric approach, get that transport design more around the human to meet their needs and influence their behavior. And of course, focus on that integration. That's a vision that we've got as National Highways, but again, it's been shared by DFT as well. So get that multimodal, even with a car involved, even if it's not privately owned, I will say, but get those end-to-end journeys as best as we can. I know we appreciate it's a bit of a long journey, no pun intended. But I think it just shows that we cannot do this on our own, and we need to be working better together. And it feels like we all have the same desire to do what's right. So I will say, let's just make sure that we do this as one. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Vivio. Do you want to come and join me? We've got a little bit of time for any questions. I have one. You've presented something there which is really different, and I don't think in my career, I don't think I've ever sat in a room with a member of National Highways staff talking about intelligent transport systems when they focus so much on the user, and I think that is brilliant. But I also think that this represents quite a paradigm change for the organisation, and it's going to need some different inputs from National Highways itself. So how do you see the organisation in terms of that transformation and where you are on the journey at the moment?
Yes, I will take it back to my point around being a service provider rather than an operator. And what we've been mostly working on is changing how we design the technology systems, if we talk about ITS in particular, to understand what the user requirements are, what the service is, not just for the customer at the roadside. That would include the road worker, that would include the operator in the control rooms. But we need to understand what we need to achieve first. So not start with the technology as the point where then we're trying to fit into the problems we have, let's say. Understand what the problem statement is first, what the user requirements for those services are, and provide that service for us. So that has been the shift, I suppose, in the way of thinking.
Excellent, yeah. Good. Any questions from anyone? Ooh. Gosh, I think you've stunned everybody into silence there. Okay, I'll try another one then. So talk to me a little bit about the user personas that you use. So you introduced Freddie there, who I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
And how have you gone about developing some of those?
So we have a variety of different options. So chose Freddie especially because they were using mostly the strategic road network, but it's about understanding those different types of users that might not even have a long journey on the strategic road network, Freddie was going all the way from Manchester to Plymouth, for example, but even having the ones that would use junction to junction, for example, around the city, so closer to urban or suburban environment. So it's about understanding all those needs from a journey perspective, and then going back to the personal characteristics. What would someone desire? What would the priorities be in terms of the journey itself? Are they familiar with the network? Are they not? So there is a massive variety of users on the SRN, and this is only an approach that we can follow with just to try and paint that picture, that jigsaw of what our users look like and what they need from us.
But again, it's really powerful that they're evidence-based, presumably, and that you've got that data and you use the data to build up those personas.
We do, yes, and we have been using personas, I think it's fair to say, not just for this purpose, but it's a tool that we've been using as an organization to understand the social side of things. So yeah, it's not completely new for this piece of work, but because it's a powerful tool, we applied it on this exercise.
Yeah, excellent, good. Well, look forward to hearing more about how that more user-centered journey is going in terms of the design. So so we've now got a 15-minute break, and then back again in this room for a panel discussion on safer transport and how ITS in particular can make transport a bit safer. So I'd recommend everyone take a bit of time, go and get a coffee, and then come straight back. And in the meantime, I'd just like to thank Vivi Michalaki again for her presentation. Welcome back. So we've now moving on to a panel discussion entitled Safety Critical, How Can Technology Support a Safer Transport System? So we're lucky enough to be joined by 6 members of a panel, all from different modes, all from different backgrounds, all from different types of organisations. So hopefully we're going to have a good discussion, and we're going to explore some of the issues around and themes around safety, the use of technology in Vision Zero. So I'd like to start by welcoming each of the panel members, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves and say a little bit about your role in the context of safety and technology. So Margaret, do you want to start?
Hello, I'm Margaret Winchcombe, the Deputy Executive Director at PACTS. That's the Parliamentary Advisory Council for Transport Safety. We're a charity, been around for 40 years, and we have over 115 different organisations which are members, including ITS. And together we're the NGO which covers safety and transport across modes, so that's air, rail and road. I come here personally as an author of 3 reports on the safety of e-scooters, but in the role of Deputy Executive Director, I cover obviously broader range of different modes of transport.
Okay, thank you very much. James?
Hi everyone, James Riley, I'm the Managing Director for Neology UK. I sort of represent the bad guy on this panel because we do enforcement technology, which, as someone just said to me, is part of the formula, encouraging behavioural change through things like speed cameras or clean air zone technology, moving traffic offences, this kind of things that basically tries to accelerate the behavioural change towards what is ultimately safer or more sustainable transport.
Okay, thanks.
Hello everyone, I'm Siobhan Campbell. I am from the WSP. Hopefully it doesn't need that much of an introduction, in the Operations and Safety team. My background's from the Department for Transport, where I was Deputy Chief Scientific Advisor, and so I come from a very kind of umbrella, holistic perspective, and where I'm kind of most interested in this area is that intersection between people and technology and that socio-technical approach to dealing with problems like safety. And so, and the other thing I'm really interested in is innovation, so hopefully safety, innovation and people.
Okay, please.
Yeah, hi all, Flora McFarlane from Viva City. We are a tech scale-up that's working with local authorities and transport authorities across the UK. We provide computer vision-based sensors, so giving an ability to understand everything that's going on the road space. And that started out looking at how can we just say how are the roads used by all road users, including vulnerable road users, active travel. And that's developed more into how can we provide better insights on latent danger on the roads. So things like near misses, incidents that aren't reported in common road safety metrics, but that are leading indicators of danger on our roads.
And James?
Hi everyone, I'm James Heslop. I'm Network Rail's Head of Strategy, and at the minute my responsibility is around developing our research, development and innovation portfolio over the next 5 years, and also looking at our 25-year technology roadmaps that my team have produced, of which a key element of that is the safety of our workforce, the safety of our passengers, and the safety of people who interact with the rail network generally. So hopefully I'll offer a slightly different view today.
And finally, David.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Denner. I'm the Technology Manager at Welsh Government Transport. So we look after the strategic road network in Wales. I manage the 2 control rooms. I tell people I look after anything with a cable in it at the side of the road. So that's sign signals, sequencing, street lighting, traffic signals, the dark fibre network that we operate in Wales, the control room IT, which also supports then the traffic officer service that we run from the control rooms. So it's all that sort of techie stuff that my civil engineering colleagues are not really interested in.
Thank you. Okay, so opening up with some questions from me first of all, and then please be thinking about any questions that you've got. So the title of this session is How Can Technology Support a Safer Transport System? So I'm going to be a bit cheeky and I'm just going to open with that question. Margaret, can I start with you, please?
I think it can support a safer transport system in numerous different ways. So PACS supports a safe system principle, the best practice principle for reducing road deaths and serious injuries on the road. So that means encompassing vehicles, what sort of technology do we have in vehicles? I'm sure all of you have got a vehicle which has got safety features inside it, which are technology-based, to how roads are measuring vehicles travelling along them, enforcement, so many different ways. We could be here for hours.
Okay, so same question, just go down the panel. James, what's your view on it?
Yeah, so I fully agree with Margaret, so there's no point just repeating that verbatim. But I'd like to introduce maybe a slightly different dimension, though, because there is no doubt that technology can dramatically change road safety, okay? So then the question is, why isn't it? And that's because if you look at like the Stats 19 sort of figures from this year and take out the COVID impact, basically it's flatlined. 1,700 people still died on our road, 30,000 people seriously injured last year. Does that look like success? No, I don't think any of us could sit in this room and say that. And we're in a room probably full of people who provide technical solutions, technical innovations, drive innovation that can really make a difference in road safety. But there's one other factor that I think also has to be part of this discussion this afternoon, and that is an emerging gap between society's acceptance of that technology, which might be starting to hinder it. I mean, take, for example, a classic case of a speed camera that was put up after many years of petitions from the locals to push because there was a really dangerous section in Cornwall. One of our competitors put up a solution there, and very recently cut down, left lying in a farmer's field. Now, why is that? Why is there such a resistance to a camera which is in such an obvious location? Or we could start talking about ULEZ or whatever. We're all aware with those stories out there where there is a growing distrust that technology is really trying to drive an agenda of road safety. And I think that's something also that probably we should explore this afternoon, or from this afternoon, because technology is abundant in terms of what it can do, but whether people, the human factor, whether they accept that and believe that there's a problem to solve, we all do. I think probably everyone in this room does. But how do we bring that to society?
Okay, thank you. Siobhan?
Excellent, just all
Yeah.
that. But I think maybe we're kind of, good luck, David, if we're building on each as we go along. But I think that's a crucial aspect is the engagement with the problem statement. And I think there is a real challenge, and I don't know whether we do it consistently about engaging the public and properly engaging with them, not telling them, not educating them, but actually working with them to understand their issues, to get them to understand that problem statement. Why are we doing this, and what's the cause of this? There'll always be idiots, but on the whole, you want to be bringing the kind of the rest of society with you, and we need to move 100 miles away. And I'm not saying anybody in this room does it, but there is a portion of society that likes tech for tech's sake, and they really, really like tech for tech technology, and they get very excited about it, and that's great. But if you're trying to actually elicit that behavior change that we need, that public engagement, that public desire for this technology, and the public desire for the safety that technology can bring, then you have to be doing things in a different way and doing it in a very person-centered way. As I say, engaging with and working with the communities that we're wanting to influence.
Thank you. Flora?
Yeah, I think that building again quite nicely on Siobhan's point. Quite fundamentally, I think better technology can help us become proactive and preventative as opposed to reactive. And it's all, we know that the road safety levels are flatlining. We know that there are tragedies happening on the roads every single day, and the way that we approach road safety data hasn't really changed all that much. We still wait for something to tell us this is where the problem was, rather than thinking where can we look for where the problems might be. And that's where we see us fitting into this space, which is being able to come before the enforcement point, before even engaging with the communities and saying, well, what is happening on the road space that no one is really seeing, but is a leading indicator of where there might be danger. So it's about helping us get ahead of the curve as opposed to constantly looking backwards.
James?
I'm going to build on that, but I'm going to come at it from a slightly different point of view. For us in Network Rail, technology plays a key part in our safety journey. We've done the changes to our operational processes and our activities to make sure our staff, our suppliers, our customers and our passengers are all safe while they're on or around the rail network. What we're looking at now and utilising now is technology to drive that safety forward, whether that's increasing the accuracy of the packs people use on site, whether it's looking at how we deliver capital investment to get a better return, or looking at how we make sure our passengers are safe while they're in a station. If anyone uses Twitter or Facebook or any of the social media around Christmas, you always see our videos of people falling down escalators. That's not because they're funny videos, it's because it's important to us that people are safe on the network. And technology allows us to get that message to people and to help drive behavioural change. We don't have the challenges that James worked out. We have some other challenges with performance and popularity, I'm sure, but not quite in the same way. We don't have people attacking our infrastructure. But we do have issues where we have large groups of people in stations and around stations that can cause real challenges, and technology helps us keep those people and our staff safe on a regular basis.
Same question for you, David.
Could just say ditto. So that's me done. I think I'll come at it from a different angle. I mean, everything that's been said is really fit in, but I suppose how do we fund the technology to go for the safer transport? So from a road operator in Wales, people are living longer, there's bigger calls on the National Health Service. This isn't a party political broadcast, but these are the things that we need to recognise. And roads is just one part of where the budget goes and part of that tax pound. So whilst we recognise that technology can fit on the road network, we have many discussions internally, and we say, well, if we just lay the black stuff and we build bridges to fill the gaps, that's it. The road is there for people to use how they want it. Is it our role to enforce people? Do we want to live in a nanny state and fit speed cameras everywhere and enforcement cameras? People don't like being told what to do. And as soon, and we have that, we touch on everybody, don't we? Because as soon as people step outside their front door, the road network is something they use. We were talking earlier, the love affair with the car. People just pay their few £100 a month. They got a car on PCP. It's sat on their driveway. They want to jump in that car, not be told what to do. They don't want to wear their seatbelt. They want to still have a few beers and go and jump in their car. They still want to drive at whatever speed they think. And they're doing all these things. And for somehow, people still think that some of those things are acceptable. So what technology could we do? Yeah, we could fit a breathalyzer in the car. You can't start it if you had too much to drink. We can make sure the car didn't start unless you put your seatbelt on. We could use GPS, and we could say, right, you all know in Wales we've had 20 mile an hour now for the last 6 months. We could force the car with technology to drive everywhere at 20 mile an hour. That would bring down the 1,700 deaths straight away. 20 is plenty in the campaign. But again, who's going to put that up because who's going to vote for a party which is going to put all of these things in their manifesto? So it's really interesting, the mindset, and some of the things we've talked about during the course of the day is how do we, the big problem in the room is the person and the human element, because we all agree that technology can play its part, but unless we get the humans to actually buy into that technology, it's going to be really difficult, and then funding the technology as well.
Okay. I think that's really interesting. There's definitely some themes that come out. I want to pick up on that last theme, Dave, that you've just talked about, and maybe bring in James and Siobhan specifically on this one, because we've talked again about enforcement and this kind of balance between carrot and stick, I guess, in terms of road safety, and how much do you enforce people and how much do you punish them, if you like, for poor behaviour, and equally, how do you make that very visible link between individual actions and the safety implications of that. So what are your thoughts about some of the opportunities for transport for technology in doing those kind of things?
Want me to go? So, well, at the end of the day, technology and enforcement is there to accelerate a behavioural change towards an end goal. It's not a goal in itself, is it? It's not there to have the enforcement. And so we've got to look at the sort of barriers around being able to use that enforcement or the way in which things are accepted. I mean, I was thinking when Flora was saying about the ways in which we can better analyse where danger is by predicting things and everything. I mean, I mentioned to Siobhan just before we started that every week I'll get a parish council phoning me up saying, I've got a speed problem in our village, 100%, we've got money, we can do something about this. And sort of tongue-in-cheek, you have to say, well, look, I'm sorry, but you need somebody to get hurt. Because the legislation is that we can't just put up cameras. And that's good, because you can't just stick things anywhere you like. But at the same time, it seems a little bit broken that we can't even properly analyse risk and then consider what solutions, including potentially enforcement, either carrot or enforcement as the stick, if you like, to really insist on that behaviour at that area, which is considered to be a really high collision spot for whatever reason, maybe multiple modes of transport all in a very small area, which is why Wales introduced the 20, because they didn't have room within the villages to put in cycle lanes and separate all of those different modes of transport, therefore just slow everything down. At the moment, it feels a little bit broken to even have that conversation and analyse that risk and decide what the appropriate action is, even if that becomes enforcement. I don't know what you think about that, Siobhan.
No, I mean, I think it's really, and there's probably really interesting things to be learned from rail on this as well, because there is again, we were talking about this before, risk avoided is very difficult to then quantify and get people to engage with. The fact that there hasn't been a train collision or a train accident is a fabulous record for the safety of our railways, but actually on roads, people don't seem to be engaging with the safety, much as they say that they're interested in safety. Their behaviours and their choices, including switching off a lot of the features of their vehicles, suggest that actually is not as high a priority as they suggest. And so I think, again, it's back to how do you engage them with a problem statement? How do you get them to understand what the challenges are in terms of their behaviours and their control over it as well. So it'll be really interesting to hear what you have to say on that kind of the whole risk appetite of the public.
So the first thing I would say is our risk appetite was shifted by a series of very public incidents. So James's point, those incidents occurred, they were very public, they had a lot of inquiries against them. What that led to, though, interestingly, was our risk appetite as an industry. Those of you who are contractors or engaged with the rail sector will recognise what I'm describing here. Our risk appetite probably went so far the other way. What we were doing was impacting our passenger performance. We were impacting our customer delivery. So over the last 4 years or so, we've had to find a really difficult balance between performance and delivery of safety risk, whether that's through work, so physical infrastructure work. Last week, those of you who live south of Peterborough or between Peterborough and London have been disrupted because that was when the risk was least, because there was less passengers during the day, during half term. But where we have those interactions with the public, we've had to work quite hard to try and address behaviours, and we still haven't. So if you look at level crossings, where Flora and I were talking before the session, we still have those same driver issues that you have. So we look at putting full barrier crossings in because they're the safest way to stop people crossing, but then you get people stuck between the barriers because they want to get through, or you have people challenging level crossings because they're slowing them down. But you've got, I don't know, 1,000 people on the train going through at 100 miles an hour, but if I just jump the crossing, I can make it across. We still see those challenges when people interact with our network. So we have two clear risk pots. We have our own staff and teams and people who work with us, and then we have the public risk pot as well. And I don't think actually our public risk is that different. Particularly where we interact with the road network, we see all of the same behaviours and all of the same challenges that you guys have described. But where we focused over the last 10 years has been our workforce safety and the safety of the infrastructure to make sure we don't have those huge incidents through the painful episodes we've had in the past. And where we failed on that recently or in the last few years has led to, unfortunate incidents. So, yeah, that's probably the best trade-off, but you've got a little more experience with that road rail interface than I have.
I think the challenge is that it's super localized. You can, I was talking to a transport authority this week where they knew that there were huge issues with pedestrian safety, and they didn't necessarily have the indicators to say, okay, well, this is why there's so much danger posed to pedestrians. They just knew it was dangerous, and so they did a kind of belt and braces approach to try to make everything as safe as possible. But actually, after that great investment, after all of that work, there were still fatalities and issues. And the problem is that there wasn't the kind of diagnosis to understand, well, what is the issue here? You can't just have, and maybe Margaret can talk about the safe systems approach, but you can't just have a kind of blanket, like, let's make this as safe as possible, because you can't account for spurious human behavior that David knows very, very well. You've got to be able to understand, well, what is the actual danger here, whether you're doing that with types of technology that we're providing or other data points, and say, this is going to be the best course of action. It's not, unfortunately, a one-size-fits-all.
I'm just going to ask one more question, then I'm going to open it up to the audience. I just want to pick up on a couple of things that have been mentioned there. So David talked about the difficulties of funding for sort of road safety measures and enforcement measures in particular. And I know that before we got to this panel, we had a bit of a chat, and that was something that we picked up on, is this idea that actually often safety is a byproduct of projects, if you like, transformation projects, that they might be focused on other things. And similarly, we've heard an awful lot today about technology and AI and automation and connectivity. So the noise around transport technology is, there's a lot of noise around it. So I guess maybe coming to you first, Margaret, on this one. How do we keep the conversation focused on safety, particularly at a government and a decision maker level, when everyone's talking about all these different things? How do we make sure that we keep safety at the forefront and centre of what we're talking about?
I think it's a real challenge. I think it's something that people like to say that they're covering safety, but when it actually comes to it, as has already been alluded to, there can be political pressures that push in other ways, because metrics relating to economics, how efficient a systems can shout louder than safety. It's absolutely right. We have flatlined with the number of people who are killed and seriously injured on the roads each year. And we need to be banging on about that, because last year, or when the results come out for Stats 19 this year, we'll find that from the records starting in the 1920s, 500,000 people have died on the roads in the UK. And that's just too many, and we need to be shouting out about it. I understand in the Birmingham paper yesterday there were photographs of people who've died over the last year, and it's bringing the humanity forward. I think politicians are driven by people. They make decisions on what people say. We need to shout out louder that it's people who are being impacted. It may then be the sort of less personal technology that can bring about the changes. General safety regulations, for example, the adoption of that would make huge differences in vehicle design and improving safety. But it's the human factors which I think need to be brought to the fore to get politicians to make changes.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else want to pick up on?
No, just to kind of, that the human stories are absolutely critical, and I think kind of that's the way to get across. But I think in terms of kind of government reporting and making decision makers have the right information in front of them, there is a carriageway for each kind of, you can say there's safety, there's sustainability, there's economics, and I think it's making sure that pillar of data is in parallel with all the other ones, and made sure that kind of, so rather than saying and also safety down here, that there is a kind of a real, it's one of the 4 pillars that you look out for in every business case. And I think you can, that is feasible, and getting to that place that's something you have to look at. So even if you are making decisions that aren't safety beneficial, you have to explicitly show that what the impact on safety is. And I think that would help the argument.
I think it's also difficult knowing from a role of technology, is which technology to use as well sometimes. I mean, as I look around the room, some of you might remember, it's the VHS Betamax syndrome. Which technology did you invest in, and did you make the right choice? And there are so many SMEs, there's so many people talk about, oh, don't worry, it's open protocol. But then you realize that open protocol doesn't work with that open protocol. So it can be a real challenge sometimes to know where to spend that valuable resource. And you can put the business cases together, but there is only a finite amount of resources. So making sure that we use the right technology and the right tool to solve that problem.
I think if I can just jump on that, because I can see Darren at the back of the room, but we were talking about AI and the use of AI in transport data earlier, and that is the beauty of technologies built on machine learning and AI, is that you can build for the problem that you're trying to solve. And so we have a network of sensors across TfWM, mainly looking at traffic flows, but knowing that they published their great road safety strategy last year, and this is a big priority for them, looking at, okay, well, what's their current investment and how can it be leveraged to solve new problems? And so I suppose, David, to your point, it's about looking at not just, what else is out there, but what can you use that you have currently that can then feed into what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
I also feel we've been a little bit sort of negative, haven't we, in terms of talking about problem, but I think we should probably use this moment to celebrate some of the successes as well, where that has really worked well. And I was thinking, and we were talking, like you mentioned, about the A9 before when we were chatting, driving and sort of average speed all the way up there and what difference that has made. But probably we're all familiar with the sort of success of things like Taskar, the average speed at roadworks, and those signs that were there for ages saying, my dad works here or whatever, getting people connected with the problem statement. Everyone understood there was vulnerable workers within that area, more frustration when there's no workers there. Let's not go down that path. But when there's workers in that area, there's cones, narrow lanes, etc., everyone sees the camera. It was the World Health Organization years ago. It's the perceived level of enforcement that has the greatest behavior change impact, not the actual. So whether they're dummy cameras or live cameras, doesn't really make much difference. We'd see everybody slow down, and the compliance rates for that sort of system were incredibly high, which made a massive, massive difference to road safety in that sort of scenario. So that's a success story when we can connect the problem statement to the solution, then make the enforcement very visible. You've sort of got the carrot and the stick all combined, and then compliance is high. Road safety therefore benefits, which I think it's following that same model elsewhere. The biggest problem is where people don't believe that problem statement, and then they reject whatever you say, and think it's all become very political, to sort of Margaret's point at the beginning of this.
So we've seen some real successes with particularly the deployment of AI with cameras in our stations to tackle criminality, and it is a really positive story for us. Often in London terminus stations, we suffered with a lot of criminality happening and incidents occurring. And as an organisation, we decided we'd spend some of our R&D funding to look at deploying AI tracking cameras that could identify people and then could start to identify criminal behaviour. We trained them using actors and police officers initially. And what happened when we publicised that is almost all of the criminality disappeared out of stations. Once people realised we could identify them, it shifted that behaviour, and it became something that is really powerful to us. And what we've seen over the last 6 months, unfortunately, is a change in the violence our staff has faced. And to your point, David, of having to understand what that technology is, we're now having to adapt. So we've invested and we're now having to adapt. We're seeing a lot of stabbing crimes on our customer service staff. So these are the people you see on concourses or who dispatch trains. They have a legal and safety responsibility to operate the British rail network, but they are being stabbed on an alarming frequency. And as an organisation, we're adapting that CCTV to start to identify stabbing weapons, to start to identify firearms, and to understand how can we support our staff as well. So AI, while the technology is part of the answer, the physical technology as well, so how do we protect those staff in a completely different environment to the way our safety system is designed to work, which is by the infrastructure and on a construction site. How do you protect them when they can't wear a stab vest because it doesn't rip off if they get caught on a train and they'll get dragged along? So those things don't exist, and we need to put our research and development into the logical, which is the AI detection, to try and remove the threat, but also the physical, so that if people are stabbed, they have some sort of protective layer, whether that's a shirt or chainmail or whatever the answer is, that protects them so that they don't get injured. Just 2 weeks ago, a member of staff in London was stabbed in the back. There was a member of staff going into London on an Avanti train, was stabbed in the neck. There was one at Christmas. He turned away. And these are not people they've had stressful encounters with. These are just stabbing incidents. So we're seeing a shift in the physicality. So traditionally, if you went to Victoria or somewhere on the Friday before Christmas, it was called Black Eye Friday by the staff because you would get assaulted. So we've had to see that difference in behaviour that you mentioned change, but also where we've invested, we've had to adapt that to meet the needs of the business. It's not just been one continuous investment. And that's the key thing we've learned for that risk avoidance.
Thank you, James. Okay, I'm aware we could carry on talking about this for a long time, but I'm going to take some questions. I think gentleman down here has a question. Thanks. Priscilla's just behind you with the mic.
Yeah, my name's David Redgewell. I'm on the Passenger Safety Partnership in the Bristol area with British Transport Police, Network Rail, which is a government agency, not a company, and First Great Western, First Bus. Nobody in their right mind would take out cameras on rail stations, bus stations, or trains or buses. Everything the DFT do in guidance we get, including the new BSIP guidance, Bus Service Improvement Plan guidance from Department for Transport, includes transport safety and security, funding police officers, funding cameras on buses. Comes from Mark Harper and the Secretary of State. So anybody thinks that we're going backwards, anybody object from Wales, his idea that look, we've had 3 kids killed in Bristol in the last 3 weeks, stabbed. Do you realise on our rail network, run by First Great Western, and on Network Rail stations and on our buses, we have youngsters carrying knives because they think they're protecting themselves. This, it's about passenger on passenger violence. It's about, the incident in Knowle had a bus overseeing the death of 2 kids. We're burying them now. The reality is that cameras on the transport network are absolutely essential. But it's whether we're doing enough. The gentleman from Network Rail is right. Are we putting knife arches on stations or on bus stations? Are we doing enough? Is AI able to pick this issue up?
James, what's your view on that?
How do we remove, final point is, how do we remove the knives out of society and off our transport network? But it's a serious issue. Anybody says we don't need cameras, I think they're living in fool's paradise. In fact, we tried to remove them in Somerset as a budget saving. The county erupted. They've saved them using the town and parish councils to fund them. Just a reality check. Thank you.
So knife crime is a broader issue that I don't think we can tackle independently as transport networks. But we have a responsibility, which is why we're developing our system. I've checked, I can say this out loud. We're developing our system to identify weapons that would cause damage, whether that's firearms, knives, or explosives. And take that message and tell anyone you want. That would be my view, because we can remove them from our network. The broader societal challenge is different, but we can, and we are aiming to remove them from our network.
Okay, thank you. One more question. Go on, Paul.
Thank you, Paul Campion, TRL. There has been an extremely successful political campaign over the past couple of years about safety in transport and technology. It's smart motorways. Unfortunately, it's arguably reduced the safety of the network. If you could have one big story you could tell, one campaign that you could run at a similar level to the campaign against smart motorways, what would it be?
I'll start and pick up on a point I raised earlier, campaign that you'd like a change, and it's related to technology, and that's the general safety regulations being adopted. So when we left Europe, that meant that we left this opportunity to transform the vehicle design and technology that would improve safety with 15 different aspects. So PACS are pushing our campaign any more, but if we could make it even greater and get the political pick up with smart motorway city, that'd be great.
I'm going to leave you there. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to cut that short, but we need to move on to the next session. Thank you for that. We could have probably spent another half an hour talking, but it just remains for me to ask you all to thank the panel for coming along today.